Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. Although I've been interested in all sorts of things outside of the mutually agreed upon world of consensus reality since I was a kid, I'm constantly stumbling upon new avenues of inquiry. There are some people who not only peek behind the veil, they jump through it. And today's guest is someone that I stumbled upon whilst pouring through the vast amounts of podcast episodes that I listen to while I attend to my menial job. The immense amount of information that this woman expounded upon was amazing. Tracy Twyman takes her research to a whole new level, and her website is overflowing with videos and audio on a wide range of topics, and she's got a great sense of humor even when talking about the darkest of subjects. I start the interview by asking her where all this high strangeness began.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just, had a curiosity, especially about weird things. H.P. Lovecraft had an influence on me early on, and philosophy and learning the history of Western civilization, and learned about Freemasonic conspiracy theories when I was a teenager from just someone I met on the bus. So I don't know. I realized there was a bunch of things that were very interesting and true, but not a lot of people are talking about, and that people are fascinated by history and current events, but they're not getting the full story. And at least back then, especially, things were quite a bit different. You had to have read a book about these subjects or run into somebody who had in order to even have heard about it. So
exactly,
it wasn't a kind of sarcastic meme like it is now about, jokes about the Illuminati and stuff that nobody would have understood in the mid 90s.
Exactly. All you had to turn to is either the metaphysics section of a library or a New Age bookstore or something.
Exactly.
There wasn't very many places to turn for that kind of stuff.
So I started out doing a magazine that was just what we called a zine back then.
Yeah.
And I think I was 18 when I started it. It was, I was cutting out words and phrases and articles from books, excerpts and things, and collaging them together on pages.
Cool.
And I Xeroxed it and folded it and stapled it and, distributed it. And then eventually, a few years later, like I did that type of publication and distributed it for free once. And then a couple years later, I ended up putting out a more formal magazine that with the same title, which was Dagobert's Revenge. That had lengthy articles and was a bit more serious, and it was distributed by Tower Records, and it was in
cool.
It was in a bunch of stores here and there throughout the United States.
Nice.
Probably 30, 35 of the states at least.
Cool. Did you get a following?
Oh yeah, for years, and it was hard to manage the finances. It was one of those things where, if we'd gotten the right funding at the right time, we really could have made it work, and we didn't. So there was one sad issue where we sold out, and we had people begging us to print some more, and we couldn't. Like the people that were saying that, could have put their money together, but still not have been able to afford a press run, because we weren't doing print on demand back then.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we figured like, oh, well, if we could afford it, then probably lots more people would have bought them. But I don't know. The whole thing it got very frustrating at that point. It was like, oh, I've got all these fans, but I can't satisfy them.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, it's all right. So anyway, I went at that point. I got frustrated with doing that type of material. So I switched into writing books and did that for a long time afterwards. So
cool. Yeah, I started off doing the zine thing too. It's good to have a friend or a friend of a friend that works at Kinko's when you're doing those things.
I did actually, not in the beginning, but later on in the career of Daggerverse Revenge, I had a boyfriend who worked at Kinko's, and
oh, cool.
he helped me out. Yeah,
definitely going. It's great if you're in a city where there's a 24-hour Kinko's, and then you can go in at like 2:00 in the morning and do your thing.
Oh yeah, that's the only time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Even we were like hogging the computers back then because I didn't even have my own computer. You know, you had to pay by the minute. So
yeah, exactly. And you use their glue sticks and their scissors and all that stuff. Yeah, definitely.
I still have a ruler that I stole from Kinko's back then. It says Kinko's right on it.
Like an ancient artifact.
That's right, because it's FedEx now, and not a lot of that same stuff goes on over there anymore.
Exactly. So was the zine about the same sort of like conspiracies and alternate histories and stuff like that? Yeah,
it was all secret societies. It was kind of inspired by just reading Holy Blood, Holy Grail and Messianic Legacy. And so it was supposed to be published by the Priory of Zion or something. We didn't even say that. We had like alternate names for the group that it was published by, but that was the implication, was that it was published by them. And
nice.
Then eventually we took it way too seriously, and then it became way too serious.
Oh, wow.
That was part of the whole process too. We magically invoked a real secret society and then real enemies, and people took it way too seriously. But
yeah, that seems to happen. Yeah, it seems to happen with a lot of secret society occult groups. It's like egos. I'm not saying that's was the case in your situation, but infighting happens, and then the whole thing crumbles, and then it divides, and then there's a war, and just seems so unnecessary.
Yeah, I suppose it's unnecessary, but it is part of the general pattern.
Exactly. Were you or the circle of your friends? Were you into psychedelics and all of that stuff too, or magic?
Well, we were into studying about it. We didn't do a lot of practicing of it, but what was done in that regard, I've written about a little bit. And so there's a book which is out of print right now, but it's called Clock Shavings, and I wrote all about the seances we did back then, talking to Jean Cocteau. We talked to Cain from the Bible. We talked to Baphomet, and we learned all sorts of interesting things that I wouldn't have figured out any other way.
Yeah.
Cool. There definitely was some magic going on.
Enough to convince you that, there was something to it all.
Oh, well, yeah. And that I was involved in something that was important to some, non-human entities.
Sure.
They were interested in directing the direction that it went in, but I ended up disconnecting from that. In other words, I no longer have non-human business partners. It was a little too vague and unclear what was expected of everybody, so gave up on that.
Yes. Where did your interest is it's a major theme? Baphomet keeps reappearing. Where did all of that begin?
Actually, from the Ouija board experience, because we'd been talking to Cain, identifying himself as Cain from the Bible, and also identifying himself as several other historical figures, like in the ancient world in Mesopotamia, saying he was the same character. So anyway, we talked to him for a while about things that we happened to be researching, but when I say we, I'm talking about my husband at the time, Brian Albert, and some other people we were working with who were helping us write articles and stuff. And so anyway, it was sort of a lark at the beginning to invoke Jean Cocteau's spirit, because he was supposedly a Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, a European secret society. So we started off asking him questions and ended up getting referred to Cain for some of our more esoteric questions about the ancient past and Atlantis and stories in the Bible and things like that. And then Cain referred us to Baphomet, and it was especially our questions about the Holy Grail and the Templars. I think that's why we were being directed to Baphomet, and ended up learning about all sorts of things from that character. And I really had a different perspective on what that entity was, and how important it really had been for a number of different Western esoteric orders, and really how that character, the character of Baphomet, seems to be the central figure in a lot of these organizations that have had a lot of influence on Western history. So it became a fascination for me, that it seemed like I had a personal brush with this entity, and it had given me a different perspective on a number of topics related to history. So
Interesting.
I decided to pursue that, and it took a few years, to wrap my head around it. And amazingly, even after I got together with another author, Alexander Rivera, and we wrote a 600-page book about it that I thought was really comprehensive and covered the whole thing. And then about a year later, I came upon some other information related to Baphomet that was even, I would say, was worth more to my understanding and my investigation than everything else that I had done previously. So
wow.
It was there's still more to learn about this. What seems like very obscure subject is actually really big and really important. So it's kind of cool how everything came together. I wasn't looking for it at all. I hadn't really spent any time thinking about Baphomet before. So, but all of a sudden this character starts talking to me on the Ouija board, and a few years later, one of the world's experts on Baphomet, which you wouldn't have even thought was a subject of study, but it is.
Yeah, who'd have thunk? So did you find that character of Baphomet, or whoever was saying that they were Baphomet, to be like, were they intimidating at all? Were they friendly and helpful? Were they all of the above and a lot more?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, because there was times when it seemed friendly, and there was times when it seemed kind of threatening, and definitely many times when it seemed aloof and like it was not giving us a straight answer, and many things that would just come across as lies, basically. And then a lot of truths and things that in some cases it would take years to figure out what was meant by a particular message, but some of the things turned out, right away. I would be able to do some research on the internet or in a book and confirm a very obscure piece of information told to me by this character. So
wow.
It seemed like it kept bearing some fruit, enough for me to pursue it for a long, long time.
Wow. That's amazing. So you never had a doubt that it wasn't some trickster spirit trying to pull one over on you. You felt like it was the real deal.
Well, Baphomet is a trickster spirit. So I have no idea what the motivation really was, I assume it was trying to get something from me, but I couldn't say exactly what the whole scheme is. But it ended up, whatever it was, it's like it resulted in, I think, a very important contribution to definitely the bookshelf on occultism in your local bookstore, but also this understanding of the Templars and their history and the history of Western occultism, and even the development of Gnosticism, the development of Hermeticism, and the development of Islam, and a lot of variations on Islamic doctrine, all covered, and also variations on Freemasonic lore, folklore and stories, mythology. a lot of these things are covered in the book, and I think we put together unique new understandings of these things that didn't exist before. So I guess I was pushed into doing an important work, I think, and so I can't look back and regret it at all. I think it's probably a good thing. It hasn't made me rich exactly, but at the same time, it did. It's part of my my professional accomplishments and brings in some income, and who knows what's coming of it, because the story continues to develop. I mean, obviously these subjects aren't going away because they're real. It's not just none of these things are just theories. There's lots of nonsense out there more than ever before, I suppose, but like we were saying before about how these subjects were unheard of by the majority of people in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this point, the majority of people have heard of them, and anyone who bothers to do a little bit of reading will figure out that, secret societies have a lot to do with, they have a lot of influence on everything. And then when you try to figure out what the meaning is behind the symbols they use, then you have a totally different understanding of history. So this is a very important subject of study that a lot of people indulge in and consider it, take very seriously, and they consider it not just a hobby, but just something that is important to them to understand the world around them.
Absolutely. I think that's been one of the great things about the internet and having access to all this information is not only do we get to see that there are others out there, but we also get to corroborate our information and sort of sift out, what seems to be legitimate and what seems to be, not, and move forward. It's a lot more sophisticated than it was, say, back in the 90s, like when we were all just sort of piecing things together in our dingy rooms in the Midwest or wherever we grew up, and not really having anybody, and maybe you did, but I certainly didn't have anybody to talk to about it at all. And my parents didn't want to have anything to do with even acknowledging that I was interested in such things. So, it's kind of my own deal, and I didn't get to share that with anybody. But now, I mean, obviously we're doing it right now, but the internet allows us to communicate with each other and to sort of everybody seems to have a piece, at least, if not several pieces of the puzzle, and we can all sort of put it together and see what we come up with.
Well, it's been that way for a couple decades now, and that's been really good and really important. And even some of the things that I've researched, figured out, and put together over the last few years, it would have been impossible even 5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. Because of certain records coming online and being easy enough to find, So I feel like we're at a very important point, because it seems like there's a lot of effort to stop that from continuing, where, we had probably a whole generation there, really, 20 years or so of people doing exactly what you're describing, being able to do their own research, trust their own judgment, and compare notes with other people who are doing the same, and hopefully giving each other some respect and listening to each other while they're doing that. But now you have, YouTube automatically putting in its 2 cents whenever, certain controversial subjects come up. Not only do they shadow ban, but they put this little notice there, like if you're talking about geoengineering, a little notice up there. Oh, well, chemtrails are really just contrails, and that's normal. And it's like they don't even know what you're talking about. They don't. Their little robot doesn't really know what you're talking about, but it thinks that it does, and so it tries to give you some advice. And it's so annoying. It's like, if you remember the Microsoft paperclip that would come and tell you about. Oh, yeah. Some advice for writing a letter, and this is a million times worse than that. And it's inescapable. You can't upload a video on the main platform that everyone uses without that being interjected. And plus, that the propagation of your video is being interfered with, that it's not getting out to the audience of people that are asking for it. So
Exactly.
we're definitely turning a corner and going in a different direction here. And I think it's really bad.
You think it's getting worse?
Oh, much. Yeah. It's getting worse like every week. You notice more interference on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook.
Sure. Do you see any alternatives sort of coming up from the depths?
Well,
go ahead.
What I described of what we're trying to do with the current incarnation of my work here. I did books for a long time, and now I've got a lot of audio and video content on my website. Then I have premium membership for that, so that people can have access to that. And I'm working with some other people too. And the ultimate idea here is we're going to figure out how to get our message to our audience. It's not about interfering with anyone else. I don't have any kind of agenda. I'm not trying to, launch the perfect, marketing scheme to hijack someone else's thing or get in everyone's face and get my message out. It's simply that I have an audience of people that want to have the content I'm producing, and I need to find a way for them to easily have access to that and have access to notices about when there's new content. And right now, it's not like there was some law that anyone made, but it's a result of marketing and everybody flocking in the same direction for years and years, that now everybody is used to getting messages through Facebook and Twitter and maybe YouTube, and they assume that if they subscribe to something, then they'll find out when there's new stuff. And it seems at this point that we've got to have more direct ways of communicating with your audience and go back to, a lot of people don't even have a website now, and got to have a mailing list. Ideally, maybe what I'm going to try to do is I've been testing several different apps, all the ones that I've tried that most of them are cheap or free. So maybe I have to spend more bucks, but I have to find one that works, and the simple idea is just it notifies people on their mobile device when we have new content. And amazingly, it's hard to build your own, it's probably not that hard. I'll figure it out eventually. But yeah, it's like most people don't. Most people go through one of these services that is going to be censored. And
yes,
they may not even realize they're being censored, and they may think that they're a loser and it's not working for them because they suck. And you wouldn't know. There's no way of finding out because there's just a broad list at this point of subjects that are going to be interfered with if you use certain words. And it's impossible to build a marketing plan, because you have no idea whether your message is going to get out or not. And it's just BS. So we're trying to find ways to get back to basics here and build a system that works. Right now, most of my videos that I put out, I will put out a version just on my website, hosted on my website, so that nobody can take that away from me. People can always come there and see it, hopefully. Look, if they really want to deplatform you, they can, but mostly I haven't, because I'm not really doing anything that controversial, and that in itself is a lesson to everybody. Like, I'm not, doing white power or any of that stuff. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm not doing any of the hot and button issues you'd think, talking about Baphomet a little bit, maybe talk about chemtrails or something. It doesn't seem like, I'm not on the big enemy list here, but I'm being interfered with enough. And there are some subjects I've gotten into in the past that did get me like a lot of negative attention. I won't get into that, but it's like, the point is just that this is happening to everybody. And it's not about figuring out the correct terms to use and constantly adjusting your plan in order to go along with the mainstream here. I want to figure out how to get around that. And then I'm hoping, that will be useful to somebody, not just our audience, but also like other people will be inspired by that and do the same thing, because
Sure.
I think that's what we need to be doing here is instead of lamenting how we're not being handed a platform that's open and free, we need to build our own again. You can't complain
Absolutely.
if you're on someone else's property, and that's what
Exactly.
we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube, obviously they do have the right to do what they're doing. It's just highly frustrating, and it basically boils down to censorship. But it is, it is their yard that we're playing in. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. We need to come up with something ourselves. And that's one of the great things about technology. It should be very possible to do that.
It should be, but yeah, I think we've had a period of being lazy here, and so a lot of people, I'm sure younger people probably are used to getting way more prefabricated experiences through their phone and apps that give them everything, present everything to them, choose things that its AI system thinks that they will like.
Exactly.
And it's a way different experience than digging through a record store and finding, the obscure bands that you've heard of.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm not putting down people. I'm just saying, like, skills are being lost here that maybe we should regain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Digging through record store racks, that is a lost art. Like that was so wonderful to do. You really felt like a true pioneer when you stumbled across something that nobody had ever heard of and it looked really cool.
Yeah, it's hard to find anything that's unique or well, basically I don't even go shopping in stores anymore because usually when I try, it's disappointing because they're not even trying to keep things in stock because they can't compete with the online sellers. So it's a totally different world, that's for sure.
It is, for sure. Okay, going back to Baphomet for a second. All roads lead back to... No. In one of your recent works, The Secret of Minnie's Moose, you make a connection from Baphomet to Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
Please elaborate.
Well, it all started because of a variation on the word that is mentioned in the Oxford English Dictionary. So it says that the word Baphomet is really just a misspelling of Muhammad. And then it mentions several variations on that were used in the Templar trials. It's defining Baphomet in that particular context as, they're saying that people used to use the word Muhammad as a general term for an idol. And the idea, I guess, is that people didn't really know what Islam was, and they kind of just thought of it as a pagan religion. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Muhammad is an idol, even though actually in Islam it's the opposite. But anyway, so that's the idea, is that the word Muhammad is being used as a term for an idol. The Templars are worshiping an idol, which is really a severed head or a skull. And so when they got put on trial for doing that, and they were confessing, they used different words for this thing that they were doing rituals with. And one of those variations was Moz. So that stuck in my head that it was similar to mouse, because I just remembered seeing that was the German word for mouse. Mm-hmm. But then there was also, if you put an E on the end, and one of the variations of mouse in this Oxford English Dictionary did have an E on the end. And if you put an E on the end in German, then it starts to become one of the words. There's a whole family of different words referring to knives and knife point and a person with a knife. So anyway, how did that... I explained it all in the video, but I'm trying to remember how it all came to me exactly. But it was, one thing after another of connections came into my mind. I did think about Mickey Mouse And then I thought about the Dead Mouse logo for the musician and how it looks like a death's head. And I thought about the fact that the Templar Baphomet head is thought to be the reason why the Templars used a skull and crossbones. They would put that on their gravestones and stuff. And it is thought that that's just a representation of Baphomet. So I thought, okay, well, the death's head is Baphomet, and here you have a variation on that with the mouse head for Dead Mouse. And then Dead Mouse actually gets sued because it's so similar to Mickey Mouse, to that logo with 3 circles.
Yeah.
So it's like they obviously, that company, Disney, they knew that he was making a joke about them. So it's like, it just started glaring at me that this was a magical sigil, and that it had a esoteric meaning that probably connected to Baphomet. And I put it in the back of my mind. I put it on a list of topics to cover at some point. And when I decided to sit down and actually make a video about it, which I thought would probably be a 6 or 7 minute video, I ended up doing a 30-minute video. And then I did another one after that. And that's the second load was when I connected it to Mac the Knife and a bunch of stuff having to do with Frank Sinatra. But I guess before that I realized, that the symbolism that I was really looking for, because I could tell it was there and I was just trying to figure out what it meant, was pointed at in the movie Rosemary's Baby, because they have the reference to the chocolate mousse that Rosemary eats that makes her fall asleep because it's poisoned. They're slipping her a Mickey, right? The witches in the movie are slipping her a Mickey. And the next door neighbor, whose name is Minnie Castevet, by the way, and she even has like rouged cheeks, and she's got a polka dot bandana in her hair, a lot like Minnie Mouse has the polka dot bow. And then she refers to the chocolate mousse as the mouse. She says it numerous times, very deliberately. So it seemed to me like something was being hinted at there. And then I ended up writing a lot about this subject, and I'm probably going to publish it as a book at some point. Right now it's a massive essay that if you printed it out, it would be about 400 pages. It's on the website for Plus Ultra members. But it's connecting all of these subjects, and it's basically an esoteric understanding of the concept of the mouse as being a way of surreptitiously poisoning someone to knock them out. And I talk about how this is used in several different contexts. So you have the scene going on there in Rosemary's Baby, and that's really part of a sex magic ritual. So they're doing that to the girl that's going to be impregnated by the devil in the sex magic ritual. And I connected it to rumors about what happens to the initiates at the Skull and Bone Society. It's kind of depicted in the Skulls movie, where they drink something and it knocks them out, and then they wake up in the tomb, in the ritual chamber. They've been kidnapped, basically. They've been slipped a Mickey, and then they wake up and they're being initiated. And then I knew from having been told that this is something very similar happens to initiates of the AA, Crowley order, that they are kidnapped. They know that they've put in to be initiated, and they think that there's an initiation date coming up, but then they actually get kidnapped before then, and they wake up again, like in the ritual chamber, just like in the movie with the skulls. And then very nasty things happen to them, but they are forcibly initiated. And there's several other examples. It's a ongoing motif with initiation in secret societies. It's a hazing technique to knock someone out, either physically, like hitting them over the head, knock them out, or it's probably a lot safer to just give them a drug that will just knock them out for a little while, like chloroform or something like that, just for an initiation. And then there's darker applications as well, where you knock someone out and you kidnap them, and then really, really horrible things happen to them, that they didn't sign up for. So that happens, of course, in the criminal underworld all the time. And I ended up just writing a massive essay exploring all these different types of related symbolism. And I just called it The Secret of Minnie's Moose, because that's what started it all. And all of those symbols of the mouse and the knife and the drug that's kind of slipped in under the guise of a dessert or something sweet. Those are the symbols that run throughout the whole study called The Secret of Minnie's Moose. But an important part of it is decoding Rosemary's Baby, and also decoding the song Mac the Knife and the movie that it comes from, and the stage play that it comes from, the Threepenny Opera. And it all relates to Saint Nicholas too, and it's very, very deep and elaborate. But the amazing thing I thought was that stuck in all of that was the real interpretation, I think, of Rosemary's Baby, the movie, is that it's an indictment of Frank Sinatra for his involvement with the rape of Marilyn Monroe, which was conducted in a very similar way of slipping her a Mickey and raping her and getting it all on camera to use against her to shut her up because of what she knew about the mafia and the Kennedys. And I think Roman Polanski knew all about that, and he embedded all sorts of clues about it in this movie, and it was kind of his way of antagonizing Frank Sinatra. And I actually think it's quite possible, but that resulted in the Manson murders, and that Frank Sinatra was the one that hired Charles Manson to have that happen. So obviously I'm not, trying to put together a prosecutable case, but I am pointing out what I noticed in the context of the research that I did. And really, one could write a whole other book about that, not just the Frank Sinatra angle with the Manson murders, but any number of other crimes that he seems to have been potentially involved in. He was a really big player with the mafia, and with a lot of mafia people who were involved with the CIA. So he's a very interesting character.
And didn't he at one time have some sort of affair or something with Mia Farrow?
Well, they were married, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
They were married, and their marriage broke up during the filming of Rosemary's Baby, because Rosemary's Baby was going too long, and Frank Sinatra wanted her to be in his detective movie. And what he really wanted was not for her to be in any movies at all. He was trying to get her to just be a housewife. And, she wasn't really doing that. So he was trying to keep an eye on her, So he just wanted her to be in movies that he was in. And he was really annoyed that she was basically canceling on him so that she could finish Rosemary's Baby. So he served her divorce papers while she was filming. And they really had to work on her to try to keep her on board, but they did. And it's a funny thing too, Bob Evans was the producer of both films, the detective, the one that Sinatra was in, and Rosemary's Baby. He was the producer of both. But but Polanski, you could tell he really wanted to get Sinatra's goat after this. He was on Mia Farrow's side, and Frank was trying to blame him for the breakup of their marriage. And so this is all talked about a little bit there's a movie called The Kid Stays in the Picture that talks about Bob Evans and his career. And one of the things they talk about is how he deliberately arranged it so that the detective and Rosemary's Baby would come out on the same day so that they could compete. And of course, Rosemary's Baby got, tons more viewers than the detective. And, it was all just as an FU to Frank for Bob Evans to arrange to compete one of his movies against another one of his movies. And so it seems to me if they were going to those lengths to annoy Frank Sinatra, then I'm not barking up the wrong tree here. I found that out just a few weeks ago too. So I had already written all this stuff. It was very speculative, about what I thought the vibe was and what was really going on in Rosemary's Baby. And all the subsequent research that I've done just corroborated everything that I was thinking. So,
Wow, cool.
yeah, the thing with Polanski absolutely wanting to annoy Frank Sinatra is true. And then, see, the thing about Sinatra is just he just has a really bad temper, and he knows a lot of people who will mess you up, and he's very proud of that. I mean, he's dead now, but that's the way he was. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility at all that he would have really had a grudge against Polanski for, in his mind, ruining his marriage. And so almost anyone who annoyed him even a little bit, he would basically try to kill them. And if he didn't quite go that far, he might, at the very least ruin your career. But most of the stories involve death threats and some actual attempts on people's lives. Like Jan and Dean, they both thought that Sinatra tried to kill them numerous times. Wow. Because they were one of them had been involved in the kidnapping of his son, that it looks like was some kind of scheme for his son to get money in the first place. But because they blabbed to the prosecutor about that, Frank Sinatra tried to have both of them killed, and he did absolutely ruin their careers. But anyway, yeah, I just uncovered so many stories about Frank Sinatra trying to kill people for really what normal people would consider minor issues. And in some cases, it's like, a newspaper writer writing a story that, of course, he was going to write. Like, when Frank Sinatra got photographed with Lucky Luciano and all these mobster guys in Havana, like he was basically being the cover so that they could have a conference and pretend that they were there for a Frank Sinatra concert. He brought in like millions of dollars for, as he was working as a courier too for them. He bought like millions of dollars in a suitcase for them. But anyways, like, he allowed himself to be photographed doing this, and it was, published in the newspaper. And then he went and tried to threaten the person that wrote the newspaper article. He beat him up, and then the guy's name was Lee Mortimer. Okay, then the guy tried to sue him for beating him up, and then he had thugs come and tell Lee Mortimer, okay, you have to drop the lawsuit now, or then I'll actually kill you.
Jesus Christ.
There's just a million of these. There's so much of this stuff that, I started thinking, okay, well, Manson murders, put it together. Like, so it turned out, okay, JC brings, he's the hairdresser that was her Sharon Tate's friend that also got killed. Well, so he was doing Frank Sinatra's hair. I mean, there's a lot to the Manson murders, and I get into quite a bit of it here in this essay, but Frank Sinatra is definitely a part of it. Like, and there's rumors that Nancy Sinatra was part of the family, basically, that she had been involved in orgies that happened at the Spahn Ranch, and that there's videos of it, or not video, but film of it.
Wow. So
Frank Sinatra threatened the Hollywood Star, I think it was called, it's a newspaper, for publishing an interview with Charles Manson where he mentioned that. So he threatened to kill them for mentioning Nancy's name. And then one of the main witnesses against the Manson family was this girl named Virginia Graham, who had been a prostitute. She had been in the same jail cell as Susan Atkins. And she came to the prosecutor with the story of Susan Atkins having confessed everything and all the juicy details about the murders, and including that there was other people on the list that they were planning on killing next, including Frank Sinatra and several other, famous people. And so I immediately thought, well, that's a weird detail, and since I'm already suspecting Sinatra, I'm just going to put that in the slot with the evidence of, to be looked at later. And then it comes out she wrote a book about her connection to this case, and you can find this on Amazon. And I haven't even read the book yet, but I know a little bit about what it says on the blurb. on the cover, and it says that she was a what do you call it? Frank Sinatra was one of her clients before she ended up in that jail cell. All right, so
Wow.
isn't that a weird coincidence? And
Yeah.
there had been several other coincidences already that were mentioned by Vincent Bugliosi in his book about the Manson murders, but the book was called Helter Skelter.
Yes.
But he didn't mention this. He didn't mention that. I don't think he did. I don't remember seeing it there, that Virginia had actually had sex with Frank Sinatra. But she mentions it in her own book. But the other things he did mention were that she had been to that house before. She had been driving along looking for some place to move, and she and her friend looked at that house, the Tate house, because it was up for rent at the time, and then they decided not to rent there. So, well, that's weird. I mean, what are the odds of that? And then there's another thing. Yeah, she had also she had known J.C. Sebring as well. So anyway, I think it's highly suspect, and when you consider everything else I've mentioned, and there's other things I mentioned too in the essay, it seems like Virginia might have just been sent in there to spread this message that Frank Sinatra was one of the proposed victims, and therefore take a little bit of potential suspicion off of him, because they were already looking for a mafia angle, and they were already finding one with Mr. LaBianca. It seemed like he was involved with the mafia, and then you really don't have to look very far at all to find that with Charles Manson himself. And he had been apprenticed, it said, to this one fellow. I'm having a hard time remembering his name, but I think it was Frank Costello. So it's one of these famous mobsters, and this guy had just been interviewed before Congress because of his involvement with the mafia, and then he went to jail, ended up in the same jail with very young Charles Manson. Because Manson was in and out of jail throughout his whole life.
Sure.
So when he was young and in jail, he hung out with this mobster guy and learned things from him about how to be a criminal. And so I figure, well, he must have just been working for him, or people connected to him from that point, like that was his introduction to the mafia. So and then there's, I thought that, and then I looked, and turns out there's tons of evidence of that Frank Sinatra, Manson was totally involved with the mafia, and then also with other criminal organizations that participate in killing people for money, and doing ritual murders as well. So, and a lot of times the group I'm talking about, the Process, they've been accused of doing murders with a ritual element to them to cover up for the pragmatic reasons why the murder is being done. So in other words, there are mafia hits that are disguised as, lone nut killers and satanic ritual crimes and things like that. But that's not the main reason why people are killed always. But anyway, so that milieu is connected to Manson, and also I've found a zillion ways to connect it to Frank Sinatra too. So I don't see any reason why he couldn't have been the person to pay Manson to kill Sharon Tate in order to get back at Roman Polanski for ruining his marriage.
Jesus.
And I think there's a little bit more to it than just that she was late, running late making the movie, and didn't come join him to do the detective soon enough, because the main scene with her getting raped by the demon, I think that had just been filmed when he gave her the divorce papers. So I think he had heard about, the details of that scene, which I know, took a long time to film, and they did many, many cuts, and, many different, many hours of some guy on top of his wife in a bed, basically. I don't think that he got over it, I think he
sure.
personally, and he generally overreacted when he took things personally,
Yeah, no shit. Wow. Woo. I love to see the bloopers from that scene.
Oh man, yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm being silly. Yeah, it's interesting is how you draw all that together so that the symbol of the mouse sort of comes to represent all kinds of crazy stuff like mind control, non-consensual intoxication,
Yeah.
exploitation of the body. Like that's you can almost use mouse as a verb, and like one of the questions that I have is, do you think that the masses are being moused?
Well, yes, yes. I mean, it started off with me just noticing this symbolism, and felt like I was stretching at the beginning to put it all together, but at the end, I don't feel like I am. And the mouse trap baited with cheese is kind of a symbol anyway for being hoodwinked into
Yeah.
doing something stupid.
Hmm.
And then you have the symbolism of the rat as very connected symbol, just um, a duplicitous person or a criminal.
Hmm.
And that's why the Rat Pack called themselves that. I mean,
Hmm.
there's lots of stories about how they got that name, but I mean, it's because they're a bunch of mafia thugs.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in mafia language, a rat is someone who actually, gives information to the authorities.
Hmm.
So um, it's funny. It was almost like they were flirting with the symbol of not only are um, they're criminally connected, but you never know really what side they're on too. And really it's fitting with Sinatra, who was friends with the president for a long time and then had a falling out with him, uh, but they were both totally mafia connected. And all of those people seem to have been involved with this rape of Marilyn Monroe that happened at Sinatra's casino right before she died. um, and I don't think that Frank Sinatra was innocent of, not necessarily trigger pulling or even conspiracy, but knowledge of the conspiracy against the president. If he didn't know about it exactly beforehand, he knew about it afterwards. I have no
Sure.
doubt that he was personal friends with those. I know that he was personal friends with those people that were involved, like Frank Costello, who's all Manson also knew. um, and so he, even if he didn't know the day before that it was going to happen, uh, within probably an hour of it happening, someone called him and would have told him enough for him to know, exactly what went on. So there's a story that that Frank Sinatra like stayed in his room for a day or two after the president was killed, and that he was, going through some emotions or something about it. But I think he was just scared, and wondering if anyone was going to question him about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Not like, did you do it, but just, what do you know about it? I mean,
Yeah.
these are your friends.
Exactly. That's nuts. Absolutely crazy. Well, then, what you also going back to the symbolism of the mouse, particularly the Disney three circles. What
Mhm.
else during your research? What other things did you come across that those three circles symbolize?
Well, I did connect it to St. Nicholas,
Hmm.
because St. Nicholas is represented by three circles. And there's a couple of stories that's connected to, having to do with him using 3 bags of gold donating that money to a family to keep 3 girls from having to sell themselves into prostitution. And then there's another story about him resurrecting some boys that were killed by an evil butcher and pickled into 3 barrels. And so that is connected to the 3 circles as well.
Wow.
And that the evil butcher that killed the boys is the character that eventually became known as Pere Fouettard, and also a similar character known as Krampus. So these are like the dark shadow evil versions of Santa Claus that are known in Europe and often are portrayed in festivals. And Krampus kind of looks like a satyr. He looks kind of, a little bit like Baphomet. Actually, he has goat horns often, And both Père Fouettard and Krampus are known to kidnap and consume children. And at least in the case of Krampus, also it's implied that rape sometimes occurs. So there's some very dark associations with Saint Nicholas and what seems to be essentially an alter ego of his, this dark figure of Père Fouettard. So, I connected it for a number of reasons, not only the three circles, but also the fact that Saint Nicholas's name is pronounced very similar to Mickey in a number of different countries in Europe, because instead of using an N, they'll use an M, and there's words like Mike and Mikolas, and it definitely sounds very similar. And then what are some of the other things? There's then there's the fact, okay, Père Fouettard, the way that he is depicted in festivals in Europe, usually it's a white man in blackface. And interestingly, Mickey Mouse was designed by Walt Disney after actors in blackface. So that's the way he's supposed to look. And there's a lot of connections there. Well, I didn't get into the whole thing with the Threepenny Opera really, but that's the other connection there. And then with that production, which was a stage play that came out in Germany in the 1928, I believe. So that was the same year that Mickey Mouse was purportedly invented by Walt Disney. The posters for that play have 3 coins on them because it's called the Threepenny Opera, and that's the play about a character called Macheath Messer, who's Mac the Knife, who's a bad guy who goes around raping and killing people, and he's the leader of a criminal gang. But at the end of the play, he ends up taking over a bank, and it's implied that, well, it's not just implied, he basically is part of the establishment at that point. Like, he's a thug that's being pursued by the police for most of the film, or the play. It was turned into a film a few years later, but at the end, he's part of the establishment and he's running the bank. So there's obviously a joke in there about the banksters being just as bad as the criminal gangs.
Yeah.
But it's really, I think this is the origin of Mickey Mouse, because I think it's highly likely that Walt Disney saw this play and heard about it and thought that especially if he heard the song where the person singing Mackie Messer's name sounds very close to Mickey Mouse. And the story of how he named Mickey Mouse, there's several different versions of it, and none of them really explain it. So it seems like there's, he's kind of trying to hide something about the origin of Mickey. And I think it's just because the character here is a very dark character. And so he didn't really want to talk about the fact that Mickey Mouse is inspired by a criminal and a rapist and murderer.
Sure.
But that's what I think it probably was. And I also think that Walt Disney probably had just a fascination with this character, because the way that he combed his hair and the way he did his mustache, the way he dressed and the way he walked was very similar to the way that Macheath Messer is portrayed in the film version that came out just a couple years after the stage play. And right around the time that film came out, also there was a Mickey Mouse short that came out. He'd been in theaters playing before movies for a couple of years at that point, but this new short came out called The Opry House. So it seemed like that even the name was an homage, to the Threepenny Opera. And in that cartoon, that's when Mickey Mouse wore his white gloves for the first time. And this is something that I think comes directly from the Threepenny Opera, because Mickey Messer, Mac the Knife, he wears these white gloves, and they have 3 lines on the back, just like Mickey Mouse's gloves. And they're used to keep his hands clean from blood, so that every time he kills somebody, he can just take the gloves off and his hands are clean, and it's not just for practical purposes, but it's a symbol of the fact that he always gets away with it.
Yeah.
And I think that symbolism carries over to Mickey Mouse. They say in biographies about Walt Disney that Mickey Mouse was kind of a mischievous character, and he was so dark, really, that they kind of had to start removing him from the storyline and using him less as they started to produce more Disney films, because they knew that the audience really at that point was children, and they didn't want this dark and mischievous character to be taken as a role model by children. So they started emphasizing some of the other characters and trying to mellow out Mickey. But I think that the biographies don't fully explain why that's so, because, I mean, yeah, you can see him, playing tricks on people and beating people up, but they're not really explaining what the deal is here. So, but I think it's the connection with Mickey Messer. And also, if you look at some of the really early Mickey shorts, like probably the first dozen or so, that's where you see his kind of backstreet roots, where he's selling hot dogs at a carnival, and Minnie, that's where he meets Minnie. She's a stripper. She's dancing the hoochie coochie dance. And so Black Pete is there, which is interesting. Like the nemesis in the early Mickey shorts is this guy named Black Pete, which is the same as the Père Fatard character.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Black Pete is there selling tickets to see Minnie the shimmy dancer do the hoochie coochie dance, and that's where Mickey Mouse meets her. And I think that's an interesting detail too, because it seems to harken back to, like, again, these old stage shows from like the 20s and 30s, and I think Cab Calloway had a song about Minnie the Moocher.
Yeah.
And that she was a hoochie coocher.
Yes.
So I figure that that's where Minnie's character comes from, really.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I wanted to bring up that. Okay, so this is a famous song and performance. I don't know if other performers have done this song, but I know that Cab Calloway was famous for doing it, and it's even portrayed in the movie Cotton Club. And the movie The Cotton Club comes up in my essay about The Secret of Minnie's Moose, because it's all having to do with Bob Evans, this producer, and his life of crime that ended up with I think he's the one that got murdered. And there was a huge what would you call it, murder scandal in Los Angeles involving the mafia and the production of this movie, The Cotton Club, that didn't get finished before the murders occurred. So the movie got finished after the murders, but the murders all had to do with the financing of this movie that was about this this mafia connected, basically mafia operated, speakeasy, where all these guys such as Cab Calloway did shows back then. So the character of Minnie the Moocher, Minnie Mouse, and then Bob Evans all seem to be connected here as well. So it's all very
crazy. Yeah. Yes. Does that mean Minnie Mouse also did cocaine, like mentioned in the song?
Well, I mean, how else are you going to keep hoochie cooching every day,
Exactly.
Keep your spirits up somehow.
Exactly. I'll start drawing this to a close, since we're at about an hour, and this could go on for a long time, I feel. But I don't want to keep you over the time that we talked about. But you also mentioned the three circles symbolizing castration too. And of course, there's the Baphomet connections to the rituals that include castration. And I find it interesting that Mickey Mouse, in his early thuggish incarnation, kind of talks like a, hey. And then later on, sort of the cleaned up version, he has a super high voice. Like, did Mickey get castrated? Like,
ooh,
why did his voice change,
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's far out. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, exactly. Big change.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's far out. Yeah, the whole thing with castration. I mean, I've written lots of essays about the symbolism of castration anyway, so it came up kind of naturally in my mind. It's not like I think about that all the time. There's a reason,
Yeah.
and it has to do with the myth of Saturn, who's that the okay. So he castrated his father in the Greek myths, or the Greek myths he's called Kronos, Roman myths he's called Saturn. So that's what his scythe is associated with. That's the weapon that castrated his father Uranus, and he seems to be very connected also with the figure of Saint Nicholas. And in Russia, they used to have this Christian sect in, I would say, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they practiced castration, full castration of penis and testicles for men, and women would have to cut off their breasts.
Mm-hmm.
But the men, after they would have this operation done, usually with a axe that had been heated, or a hot iron that would just cleave it off. Afterwards, there would be this scar left over with 3 circles that looked very much like Mickey Mouse's head. So
Interesting.
I just had to mention it.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and then there's the crazy photos that you include in your essay. The sinister Andy Spade wearing the mouse mask. That's just so crazy.
Yeah, from the mask is from The Rescuers. It represents one of the mice in that movie, which is about rescuing a kidnapped girl. But yeah, so he wore this mask right after his wife had killed herself. This was like his first public appearance. And he wasn't even really making a public appearance. He was just stepping out of his house and into his car. But I guess in order to avoid, I don't know what, like if you want to avoid the cameras, you might cover your face up with your briefcase or something. But why would you put on a mask to make yourself look weird?
Yeah.
It was
so strange.
Odd. But you notice he has kind of a mousy looking face anyway. Like he has the buck teeth.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very odd. And then the David Spade dressed as a mouse eating pizza.
I know.
That's very twisted too. Very Pizzagate-y references.
It would seem that way, although that was a couple of years before Pizzagate, so it's almost like he knew beforehand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I need to correct something because I just realized. Okay, I said it was Bob Evans that got murdered. It wasn't him. He was called as a witness. Like he might have known about it or been involved in it. I think that actually they were suspecting he had been the one who paid for it. But the person who got murdered was a guy named Roy Radin, who was another movie producer. But anyway, so I don't need to get into all of it, but it does seem to be all connected to the same criminal underworld that I describe in this essay. And even some of the characters involved, like this, okay, there's a contract killer named William Mensner who was sentenced for murdering Radin. This guy is mentioned by other witnesses to it's mentioned by David Berkowitz, okay, and then the message was relayed through another inmate who ended up talking to a writer who was writing about this subject. And so Berkowitz had a lot of information about the Process Church and their connections to mafia and other criminal underworld organizations. And Berkowitz, his testimony in this regard connected to these Cotton Club murders and the murder of Roy Radin. So it turned out, okay, he had mentioned someone who turned out to be the same as William Mensner. And he also said that there was a hitman involved whose code name was Mickey Mouse.
Wow.
So, another code name for another hitman who it's questionable whether it's the same guy, and a second code name for the same guy or just another guy in the same group. But so the other guy's name, his code name is Manson 2.
Whoa.
He knew Charles Manson and ran in the same circles, and for some reason chose to be known by that name. So it's quite possible that Manson 2 and Mickey Mouse are the same character. hitman for the Process Church and involved with the Roy Raiden murders and other mafia crimes.
Wow.
And what really freaks me out is that after figuring all that stuff out, that's when I figured out the code that's on Lil Uzi Vert's necklace that he had made a year ago that is studded with diamonds. And he paid like $200,000 for it. And it's a representation of Marilyn Manson on the cover of the way he was portrayed on the cover of his album, The Golden Age of Grotesque, which came out over a decade ago, I think. And on that album, he was wearing Mickey Mouse ears and then has kind of a evil black face outfit he's wearing. The whole theme of the album is like the Roaring 20s and early 30s. So it's all in this time frame of when Mickey Mouse was invented.
Wow.
It all has to do with crime and drugs and the mafia and stuff. And there's even a track that deals with the JFK and Marilyn Monroe, which Marilyn Manson obviously named himself after her, right?
Yes.
And he's connected to the Church of Satan, which Sammy Davis was a member of. Rat Pack dude, Frank Sinatra dude. Okay. And
Jesus.
but here's the thing. On this necklace, so there's a representation of Marilyn Manson, right? And he's got the Mickey Mouse hat.
Mm-hmm.
And on the hat, it says, I think, M2. It has M and then it's like squared or something. It has a little 2 up there. And I could never figure out what it was about until I learned about Mickey Mouse and Manson 2. And I realized, that's a very, very inside reference to this contract killer that's connected to the Process Church. So, to me, it's like that indicates that Marilyn Manson knows about this stuff because there's only a few books that's written in.
Sure.
And it's like a little inside joke between him and Lil Uzi Vert, who's this other he's a rapper who does a lot of stuff about Satan. And
what?
Yeah, he has a lot of satanic references in his art. And so
interesting.
Then they're friends. Well, okay. Marilyn Manson is like, his idol, and it's the only guy he follows on Twitter, and the only famous person he seems to care about is Marilyn Manson. So they seem to have some weird relationship, and they share this joke about Manson too. And the only possible interpretation is that they know about, that he was, that this guy was involved with Roy Raiden murders. He was involved with the Manson killers. And it's just a little private joke between them because, basically it's the same milieu. The Mansons, it's the same milieu as, the Church of Satan. That is what seems to have inspired Marilyn Manson's early career. And I think he's still involved with.
Crazy. So Lil Uzi just raps about Satan, or does he claim to be a Satanist, or what? How?
I think he actually claims to be Satan. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's definitely possessed.
I'm not sure with what, but.
Well, if you just dip into it a little bit,
yeah,
you'll see
I should.
what I'm saying. It doesn't take much for you. You'll get the gist. Not only is he, pro the dark side, but it's just kind of sick, actually. he's, I decoded his most famous video. It's all about human trafficking. It's about trading and abusing women.
Like pro, or just a commentary on it, or?
No, it's like inside codes about doing it.
Wow.
Oh yeah. It's really, really dark.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I'll direct you to a video commentary I did about it, and
yeah, please do.
But you could even just see it, just see the video. What is the video called? It's called, if you look up Lil Uzi Vert, there's really, he's done a lot of songs, but one will have like, millions and millions. I don't know how many views it's got, like a lot. One is bigger than the others. I can't remember what it was called, but You'll see what I mean.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to. I think you should do an impromptu commentary over Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I've thought about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to have a
Yeah.
website where people do such commentaries, like something that you could play simultaneously while you're watching the movie. I think that would be a
Hmm.
lot of fun. Yeah,
I'd love to.
yeah, yeah. Should arrange to do that somehow. Well, thank you so much for
Oh,
for
sure.
yeah, your research, and I love where you go with all of this stuff and pulling all these things that seem to be disparate elements into some crazy cohesive web that makes sense in a certain light, in the lights that you tend to look at things under. And I just really appreciate that. That's kind of how my mind works too. So it feels very natural to see somebody else do that also. And you do it in a really fascinating and compelling way. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for all of your work. Yeah, of course. And before we go, would you mind telling everybody out there where they can find your work and find more about you?
Yeah. So the main website is Tracy Twyman, TracyTwyman, right? .com. And then if you want to just get to the meat of things right away, instead of there's an intro page when you just go tracytwyman.com.
Hmm.
You go /plus ultra and you'll get to the blog that has everything. If you want to see absolutely everything, which I highly recommend, you join, and for $10 a month, you'll get whatever new premium stuff we put up there. There's a lot of videos. There's some audio only stuff. And then there's some essays that I don't have for the general public. Mostly, I'm talking about the really long, meaty things.
Hmm.
I'll put up there for the members, like The Secret of Minnie's Moose is there in essay form. And then I've got, what is it? Like, I've got an hour of video documentary about Minnie's Moose up there now. And there'll be another hour of stuff very soon, starting to get into the Frank Sinatra stuff.
Cool.
So it's an ongoing project. Yes.
Is it like a more extended version of what you sent me links to?
Yeah.
Cool.
And and then of course you can also find some books of mine on Amazon. The ones that are in print that I'm actually getting royalties from right now are Genuflect, which is a fiction book, my only fiction book, and then also Baphomet, the Temple Mystery Unveiled. And then the other ones are out of print at the moment, and we're considering our options as far as what to do with those books in the future. But you can find them; they're rather expensive right now. And I'm not the one selling them. I promise. I don't even have one copy right now.
Yeah, I understand. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully sometime in the future we can do this again. I really enjoyed it.
Sure. Yeah, it would be great. Thank you very much for having me.
Wow. That was a very fun conversation to have. I hope that I get a chance to talk to Tracy again, because I'm just astounded at all of the stuff that she uncovers. The depth of her research and investigation is just mind-blowing, and I really love the connections that she makes between all these disparate elements, seemingly disparate elements, and ties them all together in something that actually comes out seeming cohesive. I mean, you just have to, there's no way that you can explain what she does. You just have to listen to her or read her books or look into her website, which is, I highly recommend not only going there, but subscribing, because all the extra stuff that she has there is amazing. So I highly recommend that. Please go and visit it and give her any support that you can, and let her know that you heard her here. And I want to do anything I can to get her back. So thank you all for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Please spread the word on any social media data harvesting forums that you happen to take part in, unwillingly and unwittingly. Please spread the word. That's how this gets out. And if you want to support me financially, which is always welcome, absolutely, you can go to www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Anything from $1 up per month would be a huge help. And it would just be nice to know that there are people out there that, like what I'm doing, appreciate what I'm doing, and want to hear more. And I'm always open to suggestions. If you have any ideas for guests for me to have on The Melt, please send them to themeltpodcast@gmail.com. Always open to suggestions. So thank you all so much. Please spread the word. And it will be mid-July when I will actually have a website for this podcast. As it's been so far, it's just sort of been cobbled together, and I've just been uploading things on YouTube and getting a fair amount of response. But as of mid-July, there will be an official home for all of this stuff where you can go, and I want to have a forum where anybody is welcome to come and comment on any of the episodes, maybe get some conversation started amongst all the listeners that I have. And yeah, I want to turn it into sort of a hub where people can congregate and talk about the kinds of things that we're trying to entertain here at The Melt, which I think are very necessary. So if you agree, then come and join us. Until next time, take care.